He had $12 in his pocket, a 7-year-old daughter asleep in the back seat, and exactly one rule he swore he'd never break: don't get involved. Then Ethan Cole heard a woman say, "Please let go," 3 times in a diner off Route 19, and he broke it. 48 hours later, a stranger's cell phone video had stripped him of both his jobs, his reputation, and almost his child. What that video didn't show was the billionaire's hand around her wrist. Stay with me until the end. Hit like and drop the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. The dashboard clock on Ethan Cole's 2009 Ford Ranger read 11:47 p.m., and the heater had been dead since October. He drove with one gloved hand on the wheel and the other tucked under his thigh for warmth. The other glove lost somewhere between a FedEx depot in Harrisburg and a server room in Lancaster, where he'd spent the last 4 hours pulling cable behind a rack that smelled like burnt dust. The Ranger's transmission had a hitch in third gear that he'd been ignoring for 6 weeks because he couldn't afford to hear what a mechanic would say about it. Everything in his life was like that now. Ignored until it broke, then ignored some more. In the passenger seat sat a paper grocery bag with a half-eaten turkey sandwich, a thermos of coffee gone cold around 9, and a crayon drawing of what Mia insisted was a horse, but looked more like a dog with a hat. She'd slid it into his lunch that morning before he dropped her at Mrs. Alvarez's apartment down the hall from their own. The note on the back said, "Daddy come home soon, love, Mia." The letters uneven, the E in home written backward. He'd looked at that drawing twice since Harrisburg. He didn't look at it again now. If he looked at it again, he might have to pull over. The exit for Route 19 came up on his right, and Ethan took it on instinct more than decision. There was a diner 3 miles down, the kind of place with a buzzing neon sign missing half its letters, where a cup of coffee cost $1.75 and nobody asked you why you looked the way you looked. He needed 10 minutes. 10 minutes where he wasn't driving, wasn't working, wasn't counting what was left in the checking account against what was owed on the heat. The diner's parking lot had 6 cars in it. 3 were pickup trucks older than his. 1 was a sedan with a cracked windshield. The other 2 were a matched pair of black SUVs parked sideways across 4 spaces each, the way men with money parked when they'd stopped thinking about anyone else in the world. Ethan parked at the far end, cut the engine, and sat there for a second with his eyes closed. "Get up," he said out loud. "Come on, get up." He got up. The bell over the door rang as he walked in, and the smell hit him the way diner smells always did. Fryer grease that had lived a long life, burnt coffee, the chemical lemon of whatever they wiped the counters down with. The place was mostly empty. An old man in a Peterbilt cap nursed a cup of decaf in the corner booth, reading a newspaper that had to be 2 days old. A couple sat at the counter without speaking, the kind of silence that wasn't comfortable and wasn't a fight, just what was left after a long time. And at the back, under the speaker that was playing some country song from the 90s too quietly to make out the words, sat Brandon Hale and 4 men who looked like him. Ethan clocked them without meaning to. It was a habit he'd never managed to lose, the thing the Army had drilled into him at 19 and hadn't sanded off by the time he got out at 26. He noticed the exits first: front door, kitchen pass-through, a back hall that probably led to a bathroom, and a fire door. Then the people. 5 men at the back booth. Expensive coats, the kind that didn't wrinkle. 2 bottles of something on the table that a diner like this didn't serve, which meant they'd brought it in. Their voices were louder than they needed to be. One of them was laughing with his whole chest thrown back like he was auditioning for something. The man in the middle of the booth, facing the door, had to be in his late 30s. Sandy hair, a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than Ethan's truck, and the specific kind of red face that came from drinking since lunch. He was talking, and the other 4 were laughing at whatever he said. One of them was laughing a beat late every time, which told Ethan which one was the hired muscle. Ethan took a stool at the counter, 3 down from the silent couple, and picked up the menu he already knew by heart. "Coffee, please. Just coffee." The voice that answered wasn't the waitress he'd expected. "You want cream with that, or black?" He looked up. She was maybe 26, 27. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose on one side. A green apron tied twice around her waist because it had been made for someone bigger. She had the pad in her hand and the pen tucked behind her ear. And she was looking at him the way a person looks at another person, not the way a waitress looks at a customer at midnight, which was a distinction Ethan hadn't realized he'd been able to make until right then. "Black is fine," he said. "You sure? We've got cream. We've even got the little flavored ones if you're feeling fancy. Hazelnut. Something called French vanilla, which I'm pretty sure is neither French nor vanilla. Black is fine. Suit yourself?" She poured his cup without looking at the pour, her eyes already half on the booth at the back. "You eating anything?" "Just the coffee." "You look like a man who hasn't eaten since Tuesday." "It's Thursday." "Yeah." She said it flat, not a joke, not a pitch. And then she walked off toward the back booth with a pitcher of water like she'd been dreading that walk since the moment those men had come in. Ethan watched her go over the rim of his cup. Her name tag said Lena in block letters, handwritten in Sharpie, like she'd only been working there a few weeks and nobody had bothered to make her a real one yet. But she didn't walk like a waitress who'd only been at it a few weeks. She walked like someone who knew exactly how to move through a room of drunk men. Head up, shoulders back, not too fast, not too slow. The pitcher held in the hand closest to the table so that if someone grabbed, there'd be something between her and them. She'd done this before. Not waitressing. The other thing. And there was something else, something he caught in the 3 seconds it took her to cross the diner. She was watching that booth the way a security guard watches an exit. Not afraid. Assessing. He took a sip of his coffee, burned his lip, and told himself the same thing he'd been telling himself for the last 6 years. "Not your problem. Keep your head down. Mia's waiting." He pulled out his phone to check the time, and the screen lit up with a text from Mrs. Alvarez. She asked where you are. Told her soon. She's on the couch with the blanket. "Don't rush. The roads are icy." He put the phone face down on the counter and rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. Behind him, from the back booth, a voice said, "Oh, come on, sweetheart. It's a compliment." The old man in the corner folded his newspaper one fold tighter. The silent couple got very interested in their plates. Ethan kept his eyes on his coffee and counted to 3. "I said, come on, sit down. 1 drink. On me. Obviously on me." That was Brandon's voice. Ethan hadn't heard it before, but he knew it was Brandon's because it had that particular quality of a man who had never in his life been told no and hear it stick. "Sir, I'm working. I can't sit with customers." Her voice was steady, polite, practiced. The voice of someone who had given this exact line 1,000 times to 1,000 men in 1,000 different outfits. Working. Look at her. Working. Brandon laughed, and his 4 friends laughed with him, but only 3 of them meant it. The 4th one, the muscle, was scanning the room now. He'd noticed Ethan. "Honey, I could buy this whole diner. I could buy this whole diner and fire everyone in it and keep just you, and you'd make more in an hour than you make here in a month. Come on." "I'm going to get your check." "No, you're not. Sit down." "Sir, please let me get your—" The sound Ethan heard next was the one he had been waiting for without wanting to wait for it. The small wet sound of a hand closing hard around a wrist. A sharp intake of breath that wasn't a word. "Let go." "You're not listening. I said sit down." "Sir, please, let go of my arm." "Don't sir me. Sit." "Let go." 3 times. She'd said it 3 times. Ethan set his coffee cup down on the counter without a sound. He did not slam it. He did not stand up fast. He stood up the way he had been trained to stand up in rooms that could go sideways, which was slow and even, with his hands visible and his weight already shifted to the foot that needed to move first. The couple at the counter stared at their plates. The old man in the booth did not turn a page. Ethan walked toward the back booth, 6 steps. He counted them. Not because he needed to, but because the counting kept his breathing slow. He was not a big man, not the way the muscle at the booth was a big man. 5'11", 180, wiry, the way men who carried things for a living got wiry. Nothing about him read danger until you looked at his eyes, and by then you'd already decided he was safe, and you'd already made a mistake. He stopped at the end of the booth, close enough to be in the conversation and far enough to have room. "Hey," he said. Brandon Hale looked up. His hand was still on the waitress's wrist. Her face was turned slightly away, her jaw tight, not crying, not close to crying. The muscle had started to rise in his seat. "Hey yourself, buddy. You lost?" I'm going to need you to let go of her arm." The whole booth laughed. Not all at once. Different men laughed at different speeds, which was how Ethan knew which ones actually thought it was funny and which ones were performing. Brandon laughed longest. "You know who I am?" "No, sir, I don't." "You don't?" "No, sir." "Then I'm going to give you one chance to walk back to that counter, finish your coffee, and mind your business." Brandon's hand did not leave Lena's wrist. If anything, it tightened. She made a small sound that was not quite a gasp. "That's a generous offer from a man like me. I don't make those offers twice." "I'm sure you don't." "So?" "Let go of her arm." The muscle stood up. He was the kind of big that looked bigger in a confined space, 6'3", maybe 6'4", shoulders that wouldn't fit through most doorways if he turned them sideways. He stepped out of the booth and into the aisle between Ethan and the door, which was a mistake, because the second he did that, he had chosen his own ground instead of making Ethan choose it, and now Ethan had every angle he needed. "Sit down, pal," the muscle said. "I'm not your pal. You're about to be a problem." "I already am." "Go sit down." The muscle swung. It was a telegraphed swing, the kind a man throws when he's used to his size being the argument and has forgotten how to fight with anything else. Ethan saw it come off his hip, watched his shoulder tell the whole story before the fist even got going, and he moved the way he had been taught to move, which was not backward. He stepped in. He took the inside line, slipped the punch over his shoulder so close he felt the air of it move past his ear, and brought his own hand up flat. Not a fist, a palm heel, because in a diner full of witnesses and cell phones, you did not throw fists, you threw things that looked like you hadn't meant to throw them, and caught the muscle clean under the jaw. The man's head snapped back exactly as far as Ethan had intended it to snap back, which was just far enough to rattle him and not far enough to put him down. Ethan's other hand was already on the man's wrist, turning, and his hip was already dropped, and the muscle went sideways into the booth in a way that put him half on Brandon's lap and half on the floor and entirely out of the fight, all in under 2 seconds. Nobody spoke. The waitress had pulled her arm free the moment Brandon's grip had loosened in shock. She was standing now behind the corner of the counter, rubbing her wrist, her eyes on Ethan, and something in her face was not what he would have expected. It was not gratitude. It was not fear. It was the face of someone who was taking notes. Ethan did not look at her. He looked at Brandon. "Let me explain something to you," he said, and his voice was quiet, so quiet that Brandon and the 3 other men at the booth had to lean forward just slightly to hear it. "That lady said let go 3 times. I counted. 3 times is 1 more than you should ever need. You don't know me. I don't know you. I'd like to keep it that way. So you're going to pay your check, you're going to pick your friend up off the floor, and you're going to walk out of this diner, and I am never going to see your face again. Does that sound like something we can agree on?" Brandon Hale looked at him for a long second. It was the look of a man running numbers behind his eyes. Not the numbers a normal man would run. Can I take him? Can my guy take him? Is this worth it? But a different kind of math. The kind of math a man runs when he has money and lawyers and a last name that opens doors, and he is calculating what it will cost him to make another human being disappear. He smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Sure thing, buddy. Sure thing." He pulled out a money clip, peeled off $300 bills, dropped them on the table the way other people dropped loose change. "For the trouble," he said, and his eyes stayed on Ethan the whole time. "For everybody's trouble. Tell the owner I said hi." He stood up. His friend stood up. The muscle got to his feet with help, one hand on the edge of the booth, the other on his jaw, and he did not look at Ethan as he passed. None of them did. Except Brandon, who stopped at the door, turned and looked at Ethan the way a man looks at something he's planning to buy later on sale. The bell rang. The door closed. The engines of the 2 black SUVs started in the parking lot, and then they were gone. The diner was very quiet. The old man in the corner turned a page of his newspaper. The couple at the counter went back to their plates. The country song on the speaker rolled over into another country song, and the friar in the back made the small popping sound friars made when nobody was watching them. Ethan stood in the aisle for a second longer than he should have. His hands were shaking. He didn't look at them. He knew they were shaking because his hands always shook for about 90 seconds after something like that, and then stopped. And he had learned a long time ago not to give them attention because attention made it worse. "Sir?" He turned. The waitress, Lena, the name tag said, though something in the way she'd watched the whole exchange was already making him suspect the name, was standing behind the counter with a coffee pot in her hand. She had the calmest face he had ever seen on a person who had just had her wrist grabbed by a drunk man. The only thing that gave her away was a small tremor in the pot, one he would not have caught if he hadn't been looking for it. Yeah? Your coffee's cold. Let me get you a fresh one. That's all right. Sit down. He sat. She poured. Her hands were steadier this time. She did not ask if he was okay. She did not thank him. He appreciated that more than he could have said, because if she had thanked him, he would have had to say, "You're welcome." And there was no version of "you're welcome" for what had just happened that did not feel like a lie. You work here long? He said. Couple weeks? You're not from around here? No. Where are you from? She looked at him over the rim of the pot. For a half-second, he thought she was going to tell him. Then the half-second closed, and she smiled a small smile that did not go to her eyes. Around, she said. Around. Around. He nodded and stared into his fresh cup of coffee. You going to call the cops? He said. No. No? You want me to? Not really. Then no. He laughed once, short, without meaning to. Okay, that man is going to be a problem for you, she said. It wasn't a question. Probably. Probably? Men like that are always a problem. For somebody. She looked at him for a long moment, and something moved behind her face that he could not read. Then she reached under the counter and came up with a small ceramic plate with a slice of pie on it. Apple. The crust was the store-bought kind, but somebody had tried to crimp the edges to make it look homemade. On the house, she said. I don't need... On the house. He looked at the pie. He looked at her. He took the pie. I'll sip. He drove home at 12:40 with the pie in a styrofoam container on the passenger seat, next to the crayon drawing of the horse dog. The roads were, as Mrs. Alvarez had said, icy. He took them at 30 and let the trucks behind him pass. He did not turn on the radio. He thought about Brandon Hale's face in the doorway, the way the man had looked at him, and he thought about what Lena had said. That man is going to be a problem for you. And he thought about his daughter asleep on Mrs. Alvarez's couch, under the blanket with the horses on it that she'd had since she was 3. He thought about his wife, too, which he tried not to do, but sometimes the night made it hard not to. Her name had been Sarah. She had died of a cancer that nobody had caught until there was nothing left to do but watch her die of it, and she had made him promise, in the last week, that he would not let Mia grow up with a father who was angry at the world. You get to be sad, she had said. Sad is fine, sad is honest, angry eats you. He had not been angry in the diner. He had been calm. He was almost sure of that. He was almost sure. Didn't. Mrs. Alvarez opened her door in her housecoat and slippers and put a finger to her lips before he could say anything. Mia was on the couch under the horse blanket, curled into the smallest possible version of a person, her thumb an inch from her mouth in the old habit she'd mostly quit. Her hair had come out of the braid he'd put it in that morning. She fought sleep, Mrs. Alvarez whispered. She always fights sleep when you're late. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry to me. Be sorry to her. He bent and picked Mia up, blanket and all, and she made a small protesting sound and then burrowed her face into his neck without waking up. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo he bought her and like Mrs. Alvarez's apartment, which smelled like cinnamon from something that had been baking that afternoon. Ethan, Mrs. Alvarez said as he reached for the door. Yeah? You look like hell. Thanks. I mean it. You can't keep doing this. I know. You know, and you keep doing it. Good night, Rosa. Good night, mijo. He put Mia in her bed in the small second bedroom with the peeling horse stickers on the wall, and he pulled the blanket up to her chin, and he stood there for a second in the dark, watching her breathe the way she'd always breathed, a little too fast, like even in her sleep she was in a hurry to get somewhere. He did not know, standing there, that somewhere in the parking lot of the diner he had just left, a man in a black SUV had already uploaded a 46-second cell phone video to a private file-sharing server. He did not know that the video had been shot from an angle that did not show Brandon Hale's hand on a woman's wrist. He did not know that by the time he sat down on his own couch with his boots still on and his head in his hands, that video was being watched for the third time by a publicist in Manhattan who had a very specific talent for turning 46 seconds into 48 hours of ruin. He did not know any of that. He sat on the couch. He looked at the pie on the coffee table. He looked at the crayon drawing. "Horse," he said out loud to nobody. "It's a horse. I see it now." He ate the pie with a fork straight out of the styrofoam. It was too sweet. The crust was store-bought. Somebody had tried. He fell asleep on the couch with the fork still in his hand. In an apartment in the city that she was not supposed to be in, under a name that was not hers, a young woman sat at a small kitchen table with a glass of water and a phone in front of her and a plain black device the size of a pack of cards beside the phone. The device had a small green light on it that nobody was supposed to know was there because she had designed it that way herself. She had been calm in the diner because calm was something she had been taught the way other children had been taught piano. She was not calm now. She picked up the phone. She stared at the screen. She put the phone back down. On the black device, the small green light blinked once, steady, the way it blinked when it had recorded something and saved it and was waiting to be asked. She looked at it for a long time. Then she got up, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain an inch. Across the street, parked at the curb under a streetlight that was not supposed to be there, was a black SUV with its engine off and two men in it who were not eating, not talking, not looking at their phones. She let the curtain fall. She went back to the table. She picked up the black device. She turned it over in her hand once, and then twice, and then she slid it into the inside pocket of her jacket and zipped the pocket shut. "Okay," she said to the empty apartment, to a man she had met for 4 minutes in a diner off Route 19, to a daughter she did not yet know the name of, to a city full of people who did not yet know what was coming. "Okay." She turned off the light. The fork woke him up. It slid out of his hand sometime after 3 and clattered onto the hardwood, and Ethan came up off the couch the way he had come up off a cot in a prefab building in Kandahar 8 years before, fast, with his shoulders squared and his breath held, and for a second he didn't know what room he was in. Then the heater clicked on and the apartment's familiar groan rolled through the walls. And he saw the styrofoam container on the coffee table with its thin ring of apple filling dried to the rim, and he remembered. He remembered all of it. He sat back down on the couch slowly, like a man lowering himself into water he knew was going to be cold. His right shoulder was stiff from the way he'd slept on it. His left hand was curled in a loose fist, even though nothing in it needed to be held. He uncurled the fingers one at a time and pressed the palm flat against his knee and held it there until it stopped trembling. Then he got up, walked down the hall, and stood in the doorway of Mia's room for a long time, listening to her breathe. The horse blanket had slipped off one shoulder. He went in on the balls of his feet the way he had learned to move through rooms with sleeping people, pulled the blanket back up, and stood there with his hand an inch from her hair, not touching. Because if he touched her hair, he would wake her, and if he woke her, she would ask where he'd been. And he did not have an answer he wanted to give. "I'm home," he whispered, to nobody, to himself. "I'm here." He went back out and closed the door without letting the latch click. It was 3:40. He had to be up at 5:15. He set the coffee on a timer, set his phone alarm, set his backup alarm on the old wind-up clock on the nightstand because his phone had died on him twice in the last month, and he had learned not to trust a thing that could betray him in his sleep. Then he lay down on top of the covers in his clothes and closed his eyes and waited for sleep to come back. Sleep did not come back. What came instead was Brandon Hale's face in the doorway of the diner. Not the smirk. The calculation behind the smirk. The small pause where the man had looked at him and done the math he'd been doing, and Ethan had been on the job long enough, had seen enough rough customers in enough bad rooms to know that Brandon Hale had not lost anything in that diner. Brandon Hale had chosen to walk out, which meant Brandon Hale had decided to settle it somewhere else. Ethan opened his eyes and stared at the popcorn ceiling and counted the brown water stain above the closet. 3 steps wide, too tall. Sarah had hated that stain. Sarah had hated a lot of things about this apartment and had loved him enough to live in it anyway. At 5:15, his phone rang before the alarm did. He sat up slow. The number on the screen was his dispatcher's, Gary, which was not a name that called at 5:15 unless something had gone bad. Ethan's stomach, which had been quiet since the pie, folded itself in half. Gary. Ethan. Yeah. Hey. Gary had a voice like a man running late for something his whole life. Listen, I got a weird one for you. I'm supposed to be on the Scranton run at 6. Yeah, about that. Gary. You seen the internet? No. Look at the internet. Gary, what? Just look at it. I'll call you back. The line went dead. He sat there for a second holding the phone in the dark. Then he opened the browser and he typed his own name because he had a bad feeling, and because it was the first thing that occurred to him. And the first thing the browser gave him was a video thumbnail with his own face frozen in the middle of it. His face, in the diner. The caption under it said, "Man attacks investor unprovoked in PA diner. Full video." It had 2.1 million views. It had gone up 6 hours ago. He watched it. He watched it twice, and then a third time, because he could not believe the first 2 times had actually happened, and he needed to confirm it. The video started with him walking toward the booth. There was no sound of a woman saying, "Let go." There was no sound of a woman saying anything. The shot had been taken from the angle of the booth behind Brandon's, which meant Lena's back was to the camera the whole time, which meant you couldn't see her face, which meant you couldn't see Brandon's hand on her wrist because her own body was between the camera and the grip. What you saw was a man in a flannel jacket and a trucker cap approaching a booth full of businessmen. You saw him say something. You saw a large man stand up. You saw the man in the flannel move fast, very fast, and hit the large man under the jaw with what looked, in the low light of the diner, like a punch. You saw the large man go down into the booth. You saw the businessmen put up their hands and back away. You did not see what had started it. The caption floated across the bottom of the screen in yellow. Unhinged local attacks, businessmen over nothing. Victim hospitalized. Then, at the 30-second mark, a still photo of Brandon Hale in a suit, looking concerned and a little hurt. Brandon Hale, philanthropist and tech investor, still shaken. Philanthropist. Ethan said the word out loud in the dark bedroom, and it came out with a sound he didn't recognize coming from himself. Philanthropist. He scrolled down. The comments were what the comments always were. Lock him up. This is what's wrong with this country. Some people just want to hurt rich people because they can't be rich themselves. He looks like a drug addict. Look at his eyes. You can see the PTSD. These veterans should not be allowed in public. That last one had 11,000 likes. He set the phone face down on the nightstand. He sat there for a minute. He did not punch anything. He did not throw anything. He had promised Sarah in the last week, and he had kept that promise for 6 years, and he was not going to break it in a bedroom at 5:20 in the morning over a man he didn't know. He stood up. He went to the kitchen and started the coffee. Gary called again at 5:41. You saw it. I saw it. Ethan, I know, Gary. I gotta take you off the route. Today. Just today. Just till this blows over. Is it gonna blow over? Yeah, sure. Of course it is. These things always, you know how the internet is. Gary. Yeah? Just say it. There was a long pause. He could hear Gary breathing. He could hear Gary's wife in the background telling someone, probably one of their grandchildren, to put something down. The account manager at Westfield saw it. They're one of our biggest accounts. They called it 4. They said if I sent you onto their lot today, they were going to pull the contract. I tried, Ethan. I tried to tell them you're a good guy. You've been with us 4 years. You've never had a single complaint. It's fine, Gary. It's not fine. It's fine. I can put you on night routes, maybe. Industrial stuff. Places where nobody's gonna... Gary, it's okay. Give me a couple of days. Let me make some calls. Take your time. He hung up and stood in the kitchen with the coffee pot gurgling behind him and the window over the sink showing nothing but the brick wall of the building next door. The cold had gotten into the apartment overnight. He hadn't run the heat above 60 since Thanksgiving. He thought about the $942 in the checking account. He thought about the rent, which was $11.50, due the 5th. He thought about Mia's winter coat, which was almost too small, and about the field trip form in her backpack with the $18 charge he hadn't yet figured out where to pull from. He poured himself a cup of coffee and drank it black while it was still too hot, because the pain in the roof of his mouth was easier to hold on to than the other thing. No. Mia came out of her room at 6:30 in her footy pajamas with the penguins on them, her hair a wild nest, dragging a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Toast, who had lost one ear in a washing machine incident 2 years earlier and had never been the same. "Daddy, you're home." "I'm home, Bug." "You slept on the couch." "Little bit." "You always sleep on the couch when you come home late." "Yeah." "Mrs. Alvarez made me cinnamon toast yesterday." "I smelled it on you." "You did not."
Did too. Liar. Hey, sorry. She climbed into his lap at the kitchen table and stuck her bare feet against his thigh because he was warm and she was, in her words, an ice girl. He wrapped one arm around her and reached for the carton of milk with the other and poured her a glass one-handed, a skill he had developed with no pride and a great deal of practice. "Daddy." "Yeah." "Are you sad?" "No, Bug." "You look sad." "I just didn't sleep much." "That's the same thing."
"It's a little different." "No, it's the same thing. Mrs. Alvarez says when you don't sleep, your heart gets sad because it had to do your brain's job all night." "Mrs. Alvarez is a wise woman." "What's wise?" "It means she knows things." "Oh." Mia leaned against his chest and took a long sip of her milk and left a white mustache on her upper lip. "Daddy?" "Yeah." "Can I stay home from school today?" "No." "Just one day." "No, Bug." "Please." "Why?" She was quiet for a second. "Lindsay's mom called her mom yesterday and said you were on the news." Ethan did not move. He kept his arm where it was around her small rib cage, and kept his other hand loose on the coffee cup, and kept his face exactly the way it had been. "Yeah?" "Lindsay said her mom said I shouldn't play with her anymore." He closed his eyes for 1 second and opened them again. "I'm sorry, Bug. It's okay." "It's not okay." "Daddy, can I stay home today?" "No, baby. You got to go to school." "Why?" "Because if we stop doing the regular things, then they win. And we're not going to let them win, okay?" "Who's they?" "That's a very good question." "Who's they?" "People who don't know us." "They don't know us?" "No." "Then how come they get to say things about us?" "They don't get to. They just do it. There's a difference." She thought about that for a while. She finished her milk. She put the glass down with the careful, two-handed precision she used for things she had been told were breakable. "Okay," she said. "I'll go." "Thank you. But only because I have art today." "Fair deal." She hopped off his lap and padded back to her room to find her uniform, and Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his cold coffee and a bright, clean pain in the middle of his chest that he could not have described to anyone alive. By noon, he had been fired from the second job, too. The technician contractor called him at 11:12, and the man on the phone, a regional manager named Keith, whom Ethan had met exactly once, spoke in the careful, over-polished sentences of someone reading from a document drafted by a lawyer. Mutual parting of ways, concerns about client-facing optics. We wish you every success in your future endeavors. Ethan let him finish the sentences without interrupting and said, "Thank you, Keith," in a voice that did not give Keith anything to take home. And he hung up, and he did not throw the phone. He did not throw anything. He stood in the kitchen and put his hands on the counter on either side of the sink and looked at the brick wall out the window, and he breathed the way he had been taught to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. And when the minute was up, he let go of the counter and washed the coffee cup and put it on the drying rack. Then he sat down and opened his laptop, which was 8 years old and ran hot, and he started typing out a list. Rent? $11.50, due 5th. Electric? $92. Gas? $48. Internet? $60. Can't cancel. Phone? Can't cancel. Car insurance? $160. Groceries? $200. He added the numbers up. He added them up again. Then he opened the checking account and looked at the balance, which was the same $942 it had been at 5 in the morning because nothing comes in when nothing comes in. He closed the laptop. He sat there with his hands on top of it for a long time. Then he got up, and he got his coat, and he drove to the pawn shop on 3rd Street where a man named Vinny had been giving him fair prices for small things for 6 years. He took the watch Sarah had given him for his 30th birthday, which was the last birthday of his they had spent together. Vinny held it under the light and turned it over and read the engraving on the back, which said, "For my Ethan." All my time, S. Vinny looked at him over the top of his glasses. You sure? Yeah. It's a nice one. I know. I can give you $350. Okay. You want 4? I can go 4. This is me going 4. You don't tell anybody I went 4. I won't. I need you to nod. I'm nodding, Vinny. Okay. He took the 420s and walked out. He sat in the Ranger for 10 minutes in the parking lot with the engine off before he could put the key in the ignition. Ciao. He picked Mia up from school at 3. She came out of the building with her backpack dragging on one shoulder and her face red and her eyes wet in a way she was trying to hide. And when she got into the passenger seat, she did not say hi. She did not ask what was for dinner. She just put her backpack on the floor between her feet and stared at the glove compartment. He did not start the truck. Hey, Bug. Hi. You want to tell me? No. Okay. He let the silence sit for a while. The windshield had fogged over. He reached across her and cracked her window, because if he wiped the glass with his sleeve, she would know he was making room to watch her face, and he did not want her to know that. They called me a name, she said. Yeah? They said my dad was a violent person. Uh-huh. Lindsay didn't say it, but her brother said it. Her brother's in 5th grade. He said it in the cafeteria. Yeah. He said my dad was going to jail and I was going to go into foster care. Ethan kept both of his hands on the steering wheel even though the truck was off, because he had realized over the course of the day that if his hands were doing something with the muscle memory of a normal task, they were less likely to do something else. I'm not going to jail, Mia. You promise? I promise. You promise? I promise. Okay. She leaned over the gear shift and put her head against his arm, and they sat like that for a minute, and then he turned the key, and they drove home. That night, he put her to bed at 8:30 and read her 2 chapters of the chapter book they were working through, which was about a girl who had a horse that could talk, and then he sat with her until she was almost asleep and kissed her forehead and went out to the living room and closed the door behind him. He sat on the couch. He put his head in his hands. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. He looked at it. The number was not a number he knew. It was not even a number that looked like a real number. Too many digits, or arranged wrong, like someone had spoofed it. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Mr. Cole. Who is this? Is this Ethan Cole? I asked who this is. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm an attorney. I'd like to talk to you about what happened at the diner on Tuesday night. Ethan pulled the phone away from his ear. He looked at the number again. He put it back. I don't need a lawyer. Mr. Cole, with respect, you do. I can't afford a lawyer. You don't need to afford me. What does that mean? It means I've been retained on your behalf by a client who wishes to remain anonymous at this time. Ethan was standing now without remembering having stood. He had drifted to the window without deciding to, and he pulled back the curtain, and he looked down at the parking lot of the apartment complex where the street lamp was out, and had been out for 2 weeks, and he saw, across the street, in front of the shuttered laundromat, a black SUV parked with its engine off. The laundromat's lot was empty. There was no reason for an SUV to be there. Mr. Cole? Yeah. Are you still there? Who retained you? I can't say at this time. Then we're not talking. Mr. Cole, please, can I come see you? No. Can you come see me? I don't have gas money. I'll send a car. I don't want a car. There was a pause. On the other end of the line, he could hear a clock ticking, the kind of deep, even ticking that belonged to the kind of office he had never been inside. Mr. Cole, Daniel Reyes said, and his voice changed, went lower and more tired, the voice of a man who had been up as long as Ethan had. I understand that you do not trust me. I would not trust me either. But there is a video of you on the internet right now that is going to be used against you in ways you have not yet imagined, and my client has information about the incident that would be very helpful to you. I would like to bring that information to you, or bring you to it, in a way that feels safe to you. I'm not asking you to sign anything tonight. I'm not asking you to agree to anything tonight. I'm asking you to let me come to a place of your choosing tomorrow, at a time of your choosing, with one other person, and have a conversation. If at the end of that conversation you tell me to leave, I will leave. Ethan let the curtain fall. Who's the other person? An investigator. Her name is Harper Lane. You can look her up. I can't look anybody up. I don't have time to look anybody up. Then I'll vouch for her. That's supposed to mean something to me. No, Daniel Reyes said. It's not, but it's what I've got. Ethan was quiet for a long time. The diner, he said at last. Where it happened. Tomorrow. 11 a.m. You come in alone, you and the investigator. No suits, no cars in the lot with tinted windows. And if I see anybody who looks like they're watching the door, I'm walking out and I'm not answering when you call me back. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Don't call me sir. Yes, Mr. Cole. He hung up. He stood there with the phone in his hand. He looked at the curtain. He did not pull it back again. She was watching him from the dark of her own apartment 3 miles away. She had watched him go into the pawn shop and come out again. She had watched him pick his daughter up from school. She had watched him carry groceries, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, a package of chicken thighs, into the building at 4:40 with the daughter holding the lighter of the 2 bags. She had not followed him any more closely than that. She did not need to. She had a feed on her laptop from a device she had not placed but that somebody had, and she had decided about an hour ago that she was going to find out who. Her name was not Lena. Her name was Laura Whitmore, and she was 27 years old, and she had been raised in a house with 17 rooms that she had learned to count by running barefoot through them when she was 4. And she had spent the last 7 months working as a waitress under a made-up name in a town her family had never heard of because she had wanted, one time, to know what the world looked like from the other side of the glass her father had built around her. She had learned a great many things in those 7 months. She had learned that the people who made her coffee for a living were not less intelligent than the people who made her coffee at home. They were only more tired. She had learned that her own name, spoken at the right dinner table, opened every door in the world, and that another woman's name, spoken in the wrong diner at midnight, closed every door there was. She had learned that she did not know her father as well as she had thought she did, and she had learned some things about her father's second wife that she had not yet decided what to do with. And she had learned on Tuesday night at 11:58 that she had made a mistake she could not take back. She had made the mistake of watching a man in a trucker cap walk toward a booth of drunk men and hit one of them calmly, without pleasure, and walk away. She had made the mistake of noticing that he was not angry. She had made the mistake of feeling, for a half second she had not asked for, something she had thought a long time ago she had stopped being able to feel. She looked at the black device on the table next to her laptop. Its green light was still blinking. She thought about the 46 seconds that had made the internet. She thought about the 53 seconds before them, which existed on the device and nowhere else on Earth, and which included the voice of a young woman saying, very clearly, 3 times, sir, please let go of my arm. She thought about her father, who did not know she had been in that diner. She thought about Brandon Hale, who had been a guest at her father's house twice, whom her father had once called a promising young man with an eye for opportunity, and whom she had disliked on sight in a way she had not been able to name until Tuesday. She thought about the man in the apartment she was not going to approach, who had $400 from a watch a dead wife had given him, who was going to meet a lawyer in a diner in the morning and did not know that the lawyer worked for her. She picked up her phone. She scrolled to a contact that said only D. She typed, he agreed. 11 tomorrow. The diner. Don't push him. The answer came back in 6 seconds. Understood. You coming? She looked at the device on the table. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. She thought about the woman she had been last Tuesday, who had poured coffee and handed out pie and gone home and forgotten about most of it by morning, and she thought about the woman she was going to be on Wednesday, who was going to walk into a room with a man whose life she had already, without meaning to, partly ruined, and tell him who she really was. She typed, no, not yet. If he sees me now, he'll bolt. He's going to see you eventually. I know. You should tell your father. She stared at that one for a long time. She typed, not yet. She put the phone face down on the table. Outside her window, across the street, one of the 2 men in the black SUV got out and stretched and walked in a slow circle and got back in. He had been there for 4 hours. He did not appear to be in any hurry to leave. She closed her laptop. She picked up the black device. She put it in the inside pocket of her jacket and zipped the pocket shut, the way she had the night before, the way she was going to every night now until this was over. Then she walked to the bedroom, and she took down a locked case from the top of the closet, and she opened it with a key she wore on a chain around her neck, and she took out a thin folder with her real name on it and a passport that was not in the name of Lena and had never been. And she put them both in the inside pocket of the same jacket, the other side from the device. She did not like the weight of them against her ribs. She was going to have to get used to it. The next morning, Ethan dropped Mia off at school at 7:45, watched her walk all the way inside until the door closed behind her, and then drove the Ranger out to the diner on Route 19. He got there at 9, 2 hours early. He parked at the far end of the lot where he had parked on Tuesday night, and he turned off the engine, and he sat there with his hands on the wheel and watched the door. Nobody came in. Nobody came out. A man in a Carhartt jacket came out the side with a bag of trash and threw it into the dumpster and went back in. A pickup truck pulled in at 9:30, and 2 men in work boots got out and went inside and came out 40 minutes later and drove away. A mail truck pulled up at 10:15, and the driver waved at someone through the window and drove on. At 10:52, a gray sedan pulled into the lot and parked 3 spaces from the door. The man who got out of the driver's side was in his 50s, black, in a wool overcoat and no tie, and he was the most relaxed-looking man Ethan had seen in 48 hours. The woman who got out of the passenger side was in her 40s, white, with gray streaks at her temples that she had clearly decided a long time ago she was not going to die, and she had the stance of somebody who had been a cop once and had not decided yet whether she was glad she wasn't anymore. They did not look around. They did not scan the lot. They walked inside. Ethan watched them through the front window for 3 minutes. They sat at a booth near the back, not the one Brandon had been in, a different one, farther from the door, where anyone walking in would see them before they saw anyone else. The man ordered coffee. The woman ordered coffee. They did not lean close to each other. They did not whisper. They sat like 2 people who had agreed to meet someone and were prepared to wait. At 11:04, Ethan got out of the truck. The bell over the door rang the same as it had on Tuesday night. The diner looked smaller in the daylight. The country song on the speakers was the same song or a close relative of it, and the smell of fryer grease was the same, and the woman behind the counter was not Lena. She was not Lena, and Ethan noticed the small disappointment in his own chest with mild surprise, and then he stopped noticing it because he had work to do. He walked to the booth at the back. The man in the overcoat stood up. "Mr. Cole, Mr. Reyes, please, Daniel, Mr. Reyes." "Fair enough." Daniel gestured across the booth. "This is Harper Lane. She used to be with the state police. She's been working with me for about 6 years." "Ma'am, Mr. Cole." She did not offer her hand. He appreciated that. He sat. Daniel sat. For a moment, no one spoke. Ethan looked at Daniel. He looked at Harper. He looked down at the table, which had a ring of water on it from somebody else's glass that had not been wiped. "Okay," he said. "I came. I'm here. What have you got?" Daniel reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat. He did not pull out a folder. He pulled out a small device, the size of a pack of cards, plain black, with a small green light on it. He set it on the table between them. "I'm going to play you something," Daniel said. "It's 53 seconds long. I want you to listen all the way to the end before you say anything. Can you do that?" Ethan looked at the device. The green light blinked, steady, the way it blinked when it had recorded something and saved it and was waiting to be asked. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I can do that." Daniel pressed a small button on the side of the device, and the diner, for 53 seconds, was filled with the sound of a young woman's voice saying, very clearly, "Sir, please let go of my arm." 3 times. And then a man's voice, slurred and loud, saying something Ethan had heard before, and a chair moving, and his own voice, calm, saying, "Let go of her arm," and his own footsteps, and the scrape of a table edge, and the short, wet sound of impact, and then silence. The light on the device kept blinking. Ethan did not move. He did not move for a long time. Across the booth, Daniel Reyes watched him with a face that was careful and not kind, and Harper Lane, who had been a cop once, watched the door over Ethan's shoulder the way a person watches a door when they have decided they are on somebody's side and have not yet told him so. "Play it again," Ethan said. Daniel played it again. When it was done, Ethan let out a breath he had been holding for what felt like 2 days. "Where'd you get this?" "I can't tell you that yet." "Daniel." "I will tell you.
I promise you I will tell you, but not in this booth and not today. What I can tell you is that it exists and that it is legally admissible, and that the person who made it is prepared to testify to its authenticity in court. Is the person who made it the girl? Daniel did not answer. Harper Lane met Ethan's eyes. Mr. Cole, she said, we need to ask you some questions. About Tuesday night, about the man who grabbed her, about what you saw. And then we need to ask you some questions about yourself, because they are going to ask you those questions, and we need the answers to be ready before they do. Who's they? Brandon Hale has hired a firm, Harper said, that specializes in what they call narrative correction. They have been at this for about 36 hours. They are very good. They have done it before to people more prepared than you. So what do I do? You sit here, Daniel said, and you tell us the truth. All of it. Not just Tuesday. Everything. The army, the wife, the daughter, the 2 jobs, the apartment, the way you drink your coffee. We need to know all of it, because sooner or later all of it is going to be in a newspaper. Ethan looked at him. He looked at Harper. He looked at the device on the table, its small green light blinking, steady, patient. Behind the counter, the woman who was not Lena was refilling a coffee pot and talking to a trucker about the weather. And outside the window, a plow truck was going by with its yellow lights on, even though there was no snow. And somewhere 3 miles away, his daughter was in a second-grade classroom with her head down on her desk because Lindsay's brother had said a thing in the cafeteria yesterday. And somewhere else in the world, a man named Brandon Hale was eating a breakfast he had not paid for and watching the view count climb on a video that did not show the 53 seconds he needed it not to show. Ethan put both hands flat on the table. Okay, he said. From the beginning. Harper took a small notebook from her bag. She opened it to a blank page. From the beginning, she said. The notebook in Harper Lane's hand had a coffee stain in the shape of a comma on the inside of the front cover, and Ethan stared at it for a second before he started talking, because the coffee stain was the most human thing in the booth, and he needed something human to look at. I grew up in Altoona, he said. My dad worked on the rails until he didn't. My mom was a nurse's aide at a facility that went under in 2008. I did a year of community college and realized I was going to owe more in loans than my father had ever made in a year, and I enlisted. What year? Harper said. 2012. I was 20. Branch? Army? MOS. 11B. Then I tested into a selection course and went 18B for the last 2 deployments. Harper's pen did not stop moving, but her eyes came up a half second at 18B, and then they went back down. Daniel caught the look, and his jaw did a small thing, and he wrote something on his own pad that he did not show anyone. How many deployments? Harper said. 3. Combat. All 3. Discharge. Honorable. 2019. Any disciplinary issues on your record? 1. I broke a first sergeant's nose in Bragg in 2017. Harper's pen stopped. Daniel's pen stopped. Ethan looked at them both and did not blink. You asked, he said. We asked, Daniel said. Tell us the rest of that one. He'd been riding a kid in our platoon who'd lost his brother 2 weeks earlier, riding him bad. Wouldn't let him take the bereavement leave the chaplain had already signed off on. I told him to back off. He told me to remember who I was talking to. I told him again. He swung first. I didn't. He swung first. Witnesses, 4 of them, all sworn statements on the day. I got an Article 15 and lost a stripe and got it back in 11 months. It's in my file. It's not hidden. Does Brandon Hale's firm know about it? I don't know. Assume they do. Okay. Does Mia know? No. Okay. Harper wrote it down. Her hand moved across the page in the small, tight cursive of a person who had taken a lot of notes in a lot of booths in a lot of bad years, and her face did not change. The waitress who was not Lena came by with a coffee pot and refilled all 3 cups without asking and walked off. Your wife, Daniel said. Sarah. Sarah Cole. Maiden name Novak. We got married in 2017, right before my last deployment. She was a kindergarten teacher at a Head Start in Lancaster. She got sick in the spring of 2020. It was pancreatic. She was gone by that October. Mia. Mia was 18 months old when her mother died. Who has custody? I have sole custody. There's no contested party. Sarah's parents passed before she did. My parents are still alive, but they don't have the bandwidth,
and I don't blame them for that. Any custody concerns on the horizon? I wouldn't have thought so. Think so now, Harper said. Any family services visits? Any ER trips for the kid? Any moments in a parking lot where a teacher watched you raise your voice at her? No. Are you sure? Ma'am, I am telling you, no.
Okay. Harper wrote something. How's your drinking? I don't. At all. Not since Sarah got her diagnosis. Why?
Because I decided Mia was not going to grow up smelling it on me.
Daniel looked at him for a long moment. You said that real matter of fact.
It is real matter of fact.
Okay.
Ethan took a drink of his coffee. His hand was steady. He had promised himself in the parking lot that his hand would be steady in this booth, and he had kept the promise so far, and the promise was the only thing he was sure of. Mr. Cole,
Daniel said, and he set his pen down and leaned forward on his forearms. I'm going to be honest with you, because you have been honest with me, and because we are going to have to trust each other in some rooms soon that are not going to be this kind.
Okay. Brandon Hale is not a man you embarrassed in a diner.
I didn't embarrass him. I told him to let go of her arm.
To him, those are the same thing.
Okay.
The firm he hired, the one I mentioned, they're going to do 3 things in the next 7 days. They're going to leak something about your service record. They're going to find one person who knew you in high school or in the Army or in the 3 years after and will say something unflattering about you on camera, and they are going to pay that person enough that they will say it with a straight face. And they are going to file some kind of paper. Could be a restraining order. Could be a civil suit. Could be both. The filings will not be designed to win. They will be designed to be reported on. Okay? Are you hearing me? I'm hearing you, Daniel. What you're going to do is nothing. I don't understand. You are going to answer no calls from numbers you do not know. You are going to say nothing on any camera anywhere, even if you are walking out of a grocery store and a man with a microphone asks you how you're feeling. Your answer to any question from anyone is, I have counsel, and then you walk. You do not explain, you do not apologize, you do not tell your side. Your side is going to come out on a timeline that we control, with evidence in our hands, in front of people who can actually help you. Until then, you're the man who says, I have counsel, and then walks. Okay? Can you do that?
Yeah.
Even if they come at your daughter. Ethan set the coffee cup down slowly. If they come at my daughter, he said, I will come see you before I do anything else. That is the best promise I can make you today. Daniel nodded one time and picked his pen up. That's the one I need. Harper left the booth at 12:20 to make a phone call. Through the window, Ethan watched her walk to the edge of the parking lot and stand with her back to the building and her coat collar turned up and her breath coming out white, talking fast and low into a phone he could not hear. The sedan she and Daniel had driven in on was parked where he could see it. Nobody had come near it. Nobody had come near his truck either. Daniel sipped his coffee. He did not fill the silence. Ethan appreciated that. After a while, Ethan said, The girl. The girl. She's the one who recorded it. She's the one who had a device that recorded it. That's a careful answer. I'm a careful man. Is she safe? Daniel looked at him over the rim of his cup. That's a good question. Is she? She's safer than you, but that bar is low. Does she have people? She has people. Good people or people? Daniel thought about that for a second. Complicated people, he said, but good in the main. Yeah, I'd say yes. Is she going to be in the room at the end of this? She wants to be. That isn't an answer. No, it isn't. Ethan looked out the window. Harper was still on the phone. A pickup had pulled in at the far end of the lot. An old Dodge with a dog in the passenger seat and a man in coveralls was coming into the diner for lunch. Daniel! Yeah, I'm going to ask you one thing. You don't have to answer, but I'm going to ask. Go ahead. Is her name Lena? Daniel looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled a very small smile, which was the first smile Ethan had seen on his face, and he said, No, Mr. Cole. Her name is not Lena. Ethan nodded once and looked back down at the table and did not ask another question about her that day. Harper came back in with cold air on her coat. She sat down without taking the coat off. We have a second witness. Daniel did not move. Who? The man who was at the counter, the one sitting with his back to the booth with the woman not talking to him. You're sure? He called the tip line at 9 this morning, left a voicemail, said he saw the whole thing, said he kept his mouth shut at the time because he didn't want to get involved, but his wife made him watch the video last night and then she didn't speak to him for 2 hours, and at about 4 a.m. he decided he was going to say what he saw. Is he willing to go on the record? He's willing to talk to me tomorrow. I don't know about the record yet. He sounded like a man who could go either way depending on how the conversation goes. What's his name? Walter Krish, 61, retired ironworker. Wife's name is Doreen. They live about 20 miles north of here. Daniel wrote it down. Good. One more thing. Yeah. There's a second video. Ethan's head came up. Daniel's did too. Of what? Daniel said. Of the first part, before the man stood up. Harper set her phone on the table face down, the way people set phones down when they are not ready to show what's on them. It's a 34-second clip from a different angle, from the kitchen pass-through. Somebody in the back had their phone propped on a ticket rail, probably recording something else, and they caught it through the gap. Does it show the wrist? It shows the wrist. Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second, then he opened them. Who has it? A line cook named Miguel Ortega. He didn't know what he had until his nephew was scrolling last night and stopped on the first video and said, "Hey, uncle, isn't that your diner?" They watched it together. Miguel went and looked at his own phone. He saw what he had. He didn't know what to do. His nephew told him to send it to me. His nephew had seen me on a panel at the community college last year. Small world. Has it been shared? Only with me. I asked him not to post it. He agreed. He's a nervous guy, Daniel. He has a green card application pending. He does not want to be a witness, but he gave me the clip and he said whatever I need to do with it is fine, so long as his face and his name stay out. We can do that. We can try. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked at Ethan. Mr. Cole, I'm going to ask you not to ask to see the clip right now. Why? Because it has your face on it, and I don't want you to see your own face in that room before we have a plan for where your face goes next. Okay? Okay? Harper put her phone back in her pocket. There's something else, she said. Go, Daniel said. I ran Brandon Hale through the usual channels. Civil filings, public records, a couple databases. A cop friend of mine still has access to that. She really shouldn't. The man has 3 settled cases in the last 4 years that the public doesn't know about, because the NDAs on them are the kind of NDAs that get drafted by people who charge more by the hour than you and I both make in a day. I can't see what's in them, but I can see the shape of them. 2 of the 3 plaintiffs were women in service industries. The third was a woman who worked for one of his portfolio companies. Daniel sat back against the booth. That's a pattern. That's a pattern. Can we reach them? I don't know yet. ND? As like that come with teeth. But one of the 3, the waitress from 2022, the cocktail bar in Philadelphia, she's in my notes already. She reached out to a victims' rights group about 6 months ago to see if there was any legal recourse. They told her no, not without breaking the agreement. She seems to have been thinking about breaking the agreement for a while. Find her. Working on it. Ethan had been listening without saying anything for 10 minutes. He put his hand flat on the table now. I need to ask a question. Go ahead. What happens if this doesn't work? Neither of them answered for a second. Then Daniel said, define work. If the right people don't look at the tape, if the waitress, if the woman at the bar in Philadelphia won't talk, if Walter Krish decides his wife can cool off without him testifying, if this stays just me and a video and a man with a nice watch. Then, Daniel said, it gets long. How long? Could be a year, could be 18 months, could settle in a hallway and nobody ever hears about it. I can't do a year. I know. Daniel, I have $942 in the bank. I have a daughter. I sold my wife's watch to a pawn shop yesterday to make the rent this month, and I don't have a next month. I know. So when you say it could get long, Daniel held up a hand, not to silence him, to hold him there, in the air for a second. Mr. Cole, he said, I understand. Listen to me. My client, the one who retained me, has authorized certain things. One of those things is that I am to make sure you and your daughter do not lose your housing while this is pending. Another is that I am to make sure you have income to cover food and basic expenses through the end of this, whatever this turns out to be. You are not going to starve. You are not going to be evicted. I want you to take that off your list of things to worry about. I am telling you to take it off your list." Ethan did not move. "I didn't ask for that." "I know you didn't. I didn't ask for any of this." "I know. I came here because you played me an audio recording." "I know. I'm not going to be a kept man, Daniel."
Nobody is keeping you. What is being offered is a retainer for a consultant. You will work. You will earn it.
The client is setting up an advisory position in an operating company they already own related to workplace safety, and they have a real need, and they will have a real conversation with you about it when the time is right. In the meantime, you are on payroll as of this morning, and the first check will clear tomorrow. That is the structure. That is the offer. Ethan looked at him. "You practiced that speech." "I practiced it about 11 times in the car this morning." "It's a good speech."
Thank you. I don't know if I can take it. I understand. I don't know if I can not take it either. Yeah, that's the part I counted on. Harper, who had not spoken through any of this, now said quietly, "Take it, Ethan." He looked at her. "Why?"
"Because I've seen a lot of men in your chair in the last 6 years, and the ones who take the money in a moment like this are the ones who still have a daughter to walk down an aisle someday. And the ones who don't take the money have a harder version of the story. That is all I am going to say." Ethan looked at the coffee stain on the inside of the notebook cover. He looked at the napkin dispenser. He looked at a small chip in the formica of the table where somebody, years before, had probably set down a hot plate that shouldn't have been set down there. "Okay," he said. Daniel nodded. He did not celebrate. He did not say good. He just said okay, and wrote something down, and the thing was done. Outside in the parking lot, Daniel shook his hand. Harper did not. She nodded at him, the nod of a woman who saved her handshakes for the end of things and not the middle. "One more thing," Daniel said at the door of the sedan. "Yeah. Your daughter's school. What about it? Don't change it." "I wasn't going to. I know, I'm saying it anyway. Don't take her out. Don't pull her. Don't homeschool her to protect her. Whatever the 5th grader in the cafeteria said yesterday, her world is that school, and taking it from her will hurt her more than the story will. Just show up for pickup. Let the parents look at you. Let them look. Walk through it." "Okay." "Anything happens at that school. A teacher pulls you aside, a principal calls, a parent says something you can't unhear. You call me before you do anything else. I don't care what time. Okay?" "I mean it, Ethan." "I said okay, Daniel." Daniel looked at him a second longer and then nodded and got in the sedan. Harper got in the passenger side. They pulled out of the lot. Ethan stood by his truck for a minute with his hand on the door handle, and then he got in and he started it, and he sat there with the heater that did not work pointed at a windshield that was not fogged, and he put his forehead down on the top of the steering wheel, and he did not cry, because he had not cried in 6 years, and he was not going to start in a diner parking lot in the middle of the afternoon. But he held his head against the wheel for about 90 seconds longer than a man usually holds his head against a wheel, and then he sat back up, and he drove to the elementary school to get his daughter. There were 2 vans in the elementary school parking lot that were not school vans. He clocked them before he was out of the Ranger. A white panel van with no markings and tinted windows, parked on the street 2 buildings down, and a maroon SUV with a dash-mounted camera turned off but visible on the passenger side. The pickup line for parents wrapped around the side of the building and disappeared behind the cafeteria. He took his place at the end. 2 cars ahead of him was Mrs. Peterson, who had always been nice to Mia, and who now did not turn around in her minivan to wave the way she usually did. 4 cars ahead was a man Ethan had coached for 3 Saturdays in the 5 and 6's soccer league 2 years ago, and the man did not look in his rear view either. He did not blame them. He might not have looked either in their place. When he got to the curb, the aide bringing the kids out, a woman named Angela, who had a kind face and had hugged Mia when she'd fallen off a picnic table at the spring carnival, handed Mia into the truck and did not quite meet Ethan's eyes. She said, "Have a good one," quickly, and stepped back toward the building. The door was already closing behind her when he pulled away. Mia was very quiet in the passenger seat. He let her be quiet for 3 blocks. Then he said, You want a milkshake? On a Wednesday. On a Wednesday. We don't get milkshakes on a Wednesday. Today we do. Chocolate? Whatever you want. Strawberry. Strawberry it is. She was quiet again until they were in the drive-thru, and then she said from around the straw, Daddy? Yeah. A man had a camera. He kept his face the way it had been. Where, Bug? At the end of the pickup line. He was standing by a bush.
Did he talk to you? No, he just had a camera. What did he look like? A man. Like old man, young man, tall man, short man, tallish. He had on a gray hat, like a hat with the little ball on top. A beanie. Yeah. Did he point the camera at you? I don't know. Mrs. Kowalski got in the way. Okay. Daddy. Yeah. Why was he there? Ethan took a long breath in and let it out slow. Bug, he said, I'm going to answer you like you're older than 7, because you are older than 7 in a lot of ways that matter. There are some people right now who are trying to say bad things about our family, not because the bad things are true, because they are angry at me for a thing that happened at a restaurant last week, and they want other people to be angry at me too. One of the ways they do that is they send men with cameras to places where we go, hoping they can get a picture that looks bad if you squint at it the right way. I wasn't expecting one at your school. I should have been. I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Does that make sense to you? What? She chewed her straw for a minute. Are we going to be okay? We are going to be okay. You promise, promise. I promise, promise. Okay? She took a long pull on the milkshake. This is the best milkshake in the world, Daddy. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Back at the apartment, he sat her at the kitchen table with her homework, and he stood at the kitchen counter and called Daniel. Daniel picked up on the second ring. Mr. Cole? A man with a camera was in the bushes at her school. Today. At pickup, 20 minutes ago, tall, gray beanie. She saw him before I did. A teacher may have screened for her without meaning to. Okay. Daniel's voice did not change. Ethan appreciated that. I'm going to hang up, and I'm going to make 2 phone calls, and then I am going to call you back in an hour. In the meantime, do not call the school. Do not post anything. Do not talk to a neighbor about it. Is she okay? She's okay. She's eating a strawberry milkshake. She's doing her homework. Is she scared? She's 7, Daniel. She's scared. She's being brave about it. Yeah. I told her we're going to be okay. That was the right answer. Was it? It was. Okay. 1 hour, Mr. Cole. Ethan. Ethan. 1 hour. He hung up. He stood at the sink and looked at the brick wall of the building next door. He ran the water over his hands for a long time, even though his hands weren't dirty. Behind him, at the kitchen table, Mia was humming the way she hummed when she was doing math, a little tuneless drone that stopped when she got to a problem she didn't like, and started again when she'd solved it. In the other pocket of his jeans, the one he didn't usually use, was the crayon drawing. He had not left it in the truck after all. He had put it there on Tuesday night and forgotten it was there until he had reached for his phone in the booth with Daniel that morning and felt the folded paper against his thumb. He kept it there through all of it. He kept it there now. Across town, in an office on the 11th floor of a glass building she was not supposed to enter without checking in, Laura Whitmore stood in front of a door with her father's name on it and counted her breaths in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6, which was how her mother had taught her to breathe when she was 9 and had started getting the attacks. Her mother had been dead for 11 years. She breathed anyway. When she had the breath the way she wanted it, she turned the knob and went in. Her father, Richard Whitmore, was behind his desk. He was 64 years old, white-haired in a way that looked intentional, wearing a cardigan over a shirt and tie, which was what he wore when he had no meetings, which meant he had a meeting at 4 and had put the tie on 2 hours early because he hated putting it on at the last minute. He looked up when she came in, and his face went through a small sequence, surprise, pleasure, suspicion, in the span of a second and a half, and then settled on a careful, tired warmth. Laura. Dad. I wasn't expecting you. I know. You're supposed to be in Colorado. I know. You have not been in Colorado for 7 months. I know. He took off his glasses. He folded them. He set them on the desk. Sit down. She sat. For a minute, he did not speak. He looked at her the way he had looked at her once when she was 16 and he had caught her coming home at 4 in the morning from a party she had told him she was not going to, which was not anger, exactly, but something harder, a disappointment that had been shaped over years into its own weather system. Tell me, he said. I have been waitressing. I know. She blinked. You know, Laura. I am a man who built a company. I did not miss my only child dropping off the grid for 7 months. I knew where you were after 6 days. I let you stay because you seemed to need to. Dad, sit there. I am not done. She sat. I let you stay because when your mother was your age, she did the same thing. She went to Oaxaca for 10 months. She worked in a bookstore. She came back a person I could spend 30 years with. I assumed the same was happening to you. If it was not happening, I wanted to know about it. The people I had watching you were under instructions not to interfere with your life. They were under instructions to interfere with anyone who tried to interfere with your life. Those instructions have been exercised twice in 7 months, both times without your knowledge. You are welcome. Dad, I am still not done. Okay? You came here today, which means you have either decided to come home or you have decided you need my help. You have not come home. I know this because you are wearing a coat you bought in a consignment store in Pottsville in August, and you have not gone anywhere to change since this morning. So, you need my help. Tell me why. Laura reached into the inside pocket of her jacket. She took out the small black device. She set it on his desk. He looked at it. He looked at her. Is that the prototype? The one I built in the lab at Penn 3 years ago. The one you told me was never going to be useful. I told you it had a market. I told you the market was small. I kept one. I see that. It was in my apron on Tuesday night, Dad. He looked at it for a long time. Then he said, Tell me. She told him. She told him all of it. She told him about the diner and the waitress she had been pretending to be, and the man with the wrist, and the other man with the jaw, and the 53 seconds on the device, and the 46 seconds on the internet. She told him about Brandon Hale. She watched her father's face when she said Brandon Hale, and she saw the small thing move across it that she had been hoping she would not see, which was recognition and a pause, and then something harder. He was at our house, Richard Whitmore said slowly. Twice. I told your stepmother I did not like him. I know. She said I was being paranoid. I know. Where is she right now? I don't know, Dad. That's not the point. I'm not here about her. No, you are not. I'm here because there is a man whose life I have put in the middle of this, and I did not ask him if he wanted to be in the middle of it. He has a daughter. She is 7. He has sold a watch his dead wife gave him to pay his rent. He walked into a room with my lawyer this morning, and he did not ask for $1. I need to do this right, Dad. I need to do it right, and I need to do it all the way, and I need your help to do it, and I am asking. Richard Whitmore sat in his chair for a long time without speaking. He put his glasses back on. He picked up the small black device. He turned it over in his hands once, the way she had turned it over in her hands the night before, and the night before that. Laura, he said. Yeah. You're going to be all right. I know. You're going to be all right because you came to me on a Wednesday at 4 in the afternoon with this thing in your hand and you told me the truth about it. That is who your mother was. That is who she raised you to be. It is who you have been without her, and I did not know if you would be, and you are. Dad, let me finish. Okay. Brandon Hale is going to be a problem, not just for us, for a long line of people behind us and a long line of people ahead of us. We are going to do this correctly. We are not going to do it quickly. We are going to do it in a way that does not come apart in 5 years because we took a shortcut on a Thursday in April. Okay. Call Daniel. He's already handling it. I know. I'm telling you to call him anyway. Tell him to call me. Tell him I want the whole file on my desk by 8 tonight. Tell him I am going to pay for the 3rd victim, the bar waitress, out of my personal account, not the company's, because I do not want the company near this until it is over. Tell him I'm going to make one phone call this evening that will make Harper Lane's job easier by about 30%, and that I will tell him what the call was after it has been made and not before. Tell him the daughter,
the 7-year-old, is to be protected. I want the building of that school to be looked at by someone I trust. I want the father's apartment building to be looked at by someone I trust. I want the father himself looked at too, not watched, looked at, by somebody who knows the difference. Daniel will know the person. Okay? Laura. Yeah. You are going to have to tell him eventually. I know. You should do it before he finds out the other way. I know. Do it tomorrow. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. Dad? Tomorrow. While his coffee is still warm, while there is still a chance of a room that is not already on fire. Tomorrow, Laura. She looked at her father for a long moment. Then she said, Okay. He slid the small black device back across the desk to her. Take it with you. Don't you want— I have heard the 53 seconds, Laura. Dad, you haven't. I have. Daniel sent it to me this morning. He is my lawyer too. Did you think he was not going to? He is a good man. He did the right thing. You picked a good man. She sat there with the device in her hand. She did not know, in that moment, whether to be angry at the lawyer or grateful to her father, and she decided that she was going to figure that out later, because right then, the most important thing was that the weight of what she had been carrying for 48 hours had shifted, not gone away, but shifted, the way a load shifts when a second person gets under the other end. She put the device back in her pocket. She zipped the pocket shut. She stood up. Dad? Yeah. I'm glad you knew. I'm glad you came. She walked to the door. At the door, she turned. Dad? Yeah. The man in the diner. What about him? He's a good one. Richard Whitmore looked at his daughter for a long second, and then, for the first time since she had walked into the office, he smiled. It was a tired smile. It was a small smile. It was the smile of a father who had worried about his only child for 7 months in a way he had not told her about, and who had just been told something in a quiet voice that he had been waiting to be told. I hope so, Laura, he said. For his sake and for yours. I hope so. She closed the door behind her. That night at 9:17, Ethan was on the couch with his laptop open to a news site he had promised himself he would not open because Daniel had called back at 5:02 and told him the man with the camera had been from a tabloid content farm out of Newark, and that a call had been made, and that the man would not be in the bushes at Mia's school tomorrow or any other day. Daniel had not told him who had made the call. Ethan had not asked. He was looking at a headline. The headline said, New audio emerges in diner incident. Woman heard saying, let go 3 times. The article had been posted 40 minutes earlier. It was on a small legal affairs website that Ethan had never heard of, and Daniel had mentioned that morning as one of about 4 places they were going to seed the story from, because those 4 places were read by the journalists who set the tone for the bigger places, and the bigger places did not like to be first on anything. He read the article. It was careful. It was shorter than he had expected. It did not include his name. It referred to him only as the intervening customer. It said the audio had been made by a privately owned safety device and that the device's owner would testify to its authenticity in due course. The comments under the article were not like the comments under the video. They were slower. They were argued out. One of them said, if this is real, the first video is not the story everyone thinks it is. That comment had 53 likes. It was not a lot. It was not nothing. Ethan closed the laptop. He sat there with his hand on the lid. Down the hall, Mia was asleep. He could hear her breathing through the cracked door. A little too fast, the way she always breathed, a small body in a hurry to get somewhere. The horse drawing from Tuesday was on the coffee table now. He had put it there when he had emptied his pockets after dinner. Daddy come home soon, love Mia. The E written backward. He picked it up. He looked at it for a long time. Then he folded it once, carefully, along the crease it already had, and he put it back in the pocket of his jeans because it was going with him tomorrow, wherever tomorrow went. His phone buzzed on the arm of the couch. It was a number he didn't know. He almost didn't answer. He had promised Daniel. I have counsel. I have counsel. He looked at the number for a long moment, and then, for a reason he would not have been able to name out loud, he answered it anyway. Hello. There was a small silence on the other end. Not an empty silence, an inhabited one. The silence of a person who had dialed and then needed one more second than they had planned. "Mr. Cole." The voice was a woman's. It was low and careful, and not young exactly, but not old. It was a voice he had heard once before, saying, "You look like a man who hasn't eaten since Tuesday, and on the house, and around." Ethan did not say anything. He could not, for a second. "I would like," the voice said, "to buy you a cup of coffee tomorrow. It does not have to be at the diner. It does not have to be long. I'm going to tell you some things I should have told you 3 days ago." Ethan sat on the couch with his phone against his ear and his hand closed around the crayon drawing in his pocket, and he looked down the hallway at the cracked door of his daughter's room, and he breathed in for 4, and held for 4, and out for 6. "Okay," he said. "Tomorrow." She picked the place herself. A coffee shop on a side street off the main drag in Lidditz, 20 minutes from his apartment and about an equal distance from the diner. Close enough that neither of them was making the other do the driving, and far enough that neither of them was likely to be recognized. She asked him to come at 9:30. She asked him to come alone. Ethan got there at 9:15. He parked the Ranger on the street 2 blocks down because parking lots had cameras, and he had stopped, in the last 3 days, being the kind of man who parked in lots. He walked the 2 blocks with his hands in his coat pockets and his collar up, and he looked at every window he passed. Not hard, just the way a man looks when he has learned to look. And he pushed open the door of the coffee shop at 9:21 and went to the counter and ordered a black coffee and a small bear claw. Because if he was going to sit across a table from a woman he had been pretending not to think about for 3 days, he wanted something in his hands that wasn't the coffee. He took a table by the window. Not at the window. 1 table in. Back to the wall. He could see the door. He could see the counter. He could see the car that pulled up at 9:28 on the curb outside, a dark blue sedan that did not belong to her and did not stay. And he watched the woman who got out of the passenger side tell the driver something with 2 fingers held up, meaning 2 hours, not more, and the driver nodded once and pulled away. She came in with the bell. She did not look around. She walked straight to his table like she had known which one he would pick. He stood up. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," he said, and he stayed standing until she sat down. Then he sat. Chab. She looked different in the daylight. She was wearing a gray wool coat over a plain sweater, and jeans and boots, and her hair was down, and there was no apron and no pad and no pen behind her ear. She did not look like a different person, exactly. She looked like the same person with the layer taken off. The way the woman at the diner had been the costume, and this was the face underneath. And the face underneath was younger and tireder and more alert all at the same time. She had no coffee yet. She looked at his. "You didn't wait for me to order." "You said 9:30. I got here at 9:15. I wasn't going to sit here with an empty table for 15 minutes. Makes me look like I'm waiting for somebody." "You were waiting for somebody." "Yeah, but I don't like looking like it." She almost smiled. She did not quite. "I'll get my own," she said. And she got up, and she went to the counter, and she ordered something Ethan couldn't hear, and she came back with a mug of coffee and what looked like a plain croissant on a plate. She sat down. She put her hands around the mug and she looked at him. "My name," she said, "is Laura Whitmore." He had expected, when she finally said it, that he would feel something sharper than he did. He had practiced the feeling the night before, lying on his back on the couch, running through the possibilities of who she actually was. And he had prepared himself for the version where she was a cop, and the version where she was a reporter, and the version where she was somebody's wife, and the version where her name was, in fact, Lena. And all of this had been an ordinary coincidence that had grown extraordinary without her help. He had not prepared himself for a name he did not recognize. "Okay," he said. She watched his face. "That doesn't mean anything to you?" "Should it?" She looked at him for a long second. Then something in her eyes softened. Not relief exactly, but something adjacent to it, like a person who had been braced for impact, finding the impact was going to land somewhere else. "My father is Richard Whitmore." That one landed. He did not let it show on his face. He had promised Daniel, and Daniel had told him, among the 20 things Daniel had told him in the diner the day before, that whatever the client's name turned out to be when it turned out, the first reaction was the one the client would remember. And Ethan, who had not trusted Daniel a week ago, and who was beginning reluctantly to, had rehearsed his face for a range of names he had not been able to guess. Richard Whitmore was a name he had guessed. He had put it on a short list of 3. He had not believed it. He had written it down on a napkin last night and burned the napkin in the kitchen sink because writing a man's name down and leaving it in a trash can felt, in the state he was in, like a thing a man might regret. "Okay," he said. "You knew." "I guessed. I didn't know." "How?" "Daniel's overcoat costs what my truck is worth." Harper asked me questions a state cop would ask, except about 6 rungs higher up than a state cop is allowed to ask. Your lawyer is being paid by somebody who could pay a lawyer like that. There aren't that many of those people in this state. Your father is the one I could see letting his daughter work at a diner for 7 months without calling the diner. He didn't know. He knew. You think.
Laura, he knew. Men like that always know. He knew where you were by the end of the first week. He let you stay because he's the kind of man who thinks a thing like that is medicine and not danger. I'm not guessing about that. I'm telling you. She looked down at her coffee. He told me the same thing yesterday. I figured. It was not fun to hear. I bet. She took a sip of the coffee. She set the mug down. She looked at him across the small table. "Mr. Cole, Ethan. Ethan. Yeah. I came here to tell you that I am the reason you are in this. If I had been a waitress named Lena in a diner on Route 19, the man at that booth would have been drunk and handsy, and you would have walked away with no video and no jobs lost and no camera in the bushes at your daughter's school. Whatever he was going to be to somebody that night, he was more of a problem for me because of who I was than he would have been for me because of who I was pretending to be. That is what I came here to say." "Okay. You knew that too." "Some of it. Not all of it." "Does it change anything?" Ethan broke a corner off the bear claw. He did not eat it. He pushed it around the plate. "A man had his hand on your arm," he said. "He was not letting go. You said let go 3 times. That is what I saw. I did not see a Whitmore. I did not see an heiress. I did not see a test case. I saw a woman. I would have done the same thing if you had been a real waitress. I did the same thing when I thought you were. So no, Laura, it does not change anything." She was quiet for a long moment. He could not tell what she had expected him to say. He thought, watching her not be able to respond, that she had maybe expected him to be angry. Or maybe she had expected him to be grateful. Or maybe she had expected him to ask for something. He was not going to do any of those things because none of them were in his chest. What was in his chest was a small, flat tiredness and a steady attention, and a third thing that he did not want to name in a coffee shop at 9:30 in the morning. "Most men," she said at last, "would be angry with me. I'm not most men. I'm starting to figure that out. I'm not saying it as a compliment. I'm saying it as a fact. Anger costs me something I don't have right now. My kid is at Valley Run Elementary. She is in 2nd grade. A man stood in the bushes with a camera yesterday afternoon. I don't have room in me for anger at you. I have room in me for breakfast and for a phone call with my lawyer and for picking her up at 3. That's what's in me today." Laura looked at him. "Did anybody tell you," she said, "that you talk like a priest? That is a new one. Not like a religious one, like a man at a kitchen table giving the answers he worked out when he was alone. I spend a lot of time alone. Yeah. Anyway. Outside the window, a mailman walked past with a bag over his shoulder, and a woman with a stroller crossed the street against the light. The coffee shop was half full of retirees reading the paper on their phones with the font cranked up. A guy 2 tables over was crying into his laptop quietly in a way that suggested his Wi-Fi had died in the middle of something. Normal world, ordinary morning. Ethan looked at her across the table and he said, because he had promised himself on the drive over that he was going to ask exactly one question and no more. "Why were you there?" She did not pretend not to understand. "At the diner. At the diner. Pottsville. 7 months. Green apron. The whole thing." She turned the mug on its coaster. A quarter turn. Another quarter turn. "My mother died when I was 16, she said. She was not from the world I was raised in. She was from a town you've never heard of in Pennsylvania. Nescopec. Her father worked in a paper mill and her mother cleaned houses. She met my father at a gas station outside Hazleton when he was stopped for gas on a road trip he was taking with a friend. She was 19. He was 23.
She had been working the register since 4. They got married 9 months later. She hated my father's world most of her life, and she loved my father, and she tried very hard to raise me to be more like her than like him, and I think she succeeded mostly, and then she died, and I was 16 and there was nobody in the house who remembered what the gas station had looked like anymore. I'm sorry. Thank you. That's a hard age for it. There isn't a good age for it. 7 wouldn't be a good age for it. That one found him in a place he was not ready for. He did not react. He took a breath that was a little longer than the last one. Go on, he said. I went to Penn. I got a degree in electrical engineering because my father said I should get a degree in business, and I wanted to do the opposite of what my father said I should do. I worked 3 summers at his company because it turns out I was not as different from him as I wanted to be, and I liked the work. I designed a small safety device my senior year, the one that was in the diner. It was intended for women in service industries who couldn't afford good self-defense tools. The market turned out to be small because the women who needed it most couldn't afford even a small thing, and the company decided not to develop it. Your father's company. Yes. Did that make you mad? Yes. Good. She almost smiled again. Anyway, she said, I kept one. I took some time. I went to Colorado for a while. I did not find what I was looking for in Colorado. I came back. I told my father and my stepmother I was going back to Colorado, and I got in my car, and I drove to a town I picked off a map for being a town that did not know me, and I took a job at a diner for $8.75 an hour plus tips, and I waitressed there for 7 months. I thought I was going to learn something about the world. I didn't think I was going to learn anything about myself because I thought I already knew. I was wrong on both counts. What did you learn about yourself? She looked at him for a long second. That I am my father's daughter more than I wanted to be. Is that bad? I thought it was. I'm less sure now. Okay. And I learned, she said, and her voice went a little lower, that I am more afraid of some things than I knew I was, and I am less afraid of others. And I learned that I am not a person who walks past a thing I could do something about. That last one, Ethan said, is the one that mattered, Tuesday. Yeah. You did something about it. I did. And it cost you. Not yet. It will. She looked at him. Yes, she said. It will. They sat with their coffee for a while. She ate half of her croissant. He ate half of the bear claw. He pushed his plate toward her without saying anything, and she took a piece of the bear claw and ate it and did not thank him, which he was glad about because thanking had started to feel, for both of them, like a thing that required too much of a ledger. After a while, he said, Daniel said I would meet you eventually. I know, I told him to bring you yesterday. Why didn't he? He said you would bolt. He was probably right. He usually is. You've known him a long time. Since I was 11. He was at the funeral. He was the one who sat with me on the curb of the church parking lot when I couldn't go back inside. Ethan nodded slowly. That tracks with the man I met yesterday. Yeah. Why him? Because he does not belong to my father. He works for my father often, but he has fired my father as a client twice over the years when my father wanted to do something Daniel wouldn't do. My father kept hiring him because of the fires. It's a particular kind of loyalty that only exists between men who will walk out on each other. Okay, I wanted him for this for the same reason. I wanted somebody in the room who would tell me no. I did not want this to be a thing my father could just buy his way out of. But he's buying his way out of it. He's paying for it. That's different. Is it? I think so. Yeah. He's paying for a thing I am running. If I were not here, he would not be doing this. He would be handling Brandon some other way, a way I am not going to ask him about, and a way I would not approve of. I am here. So it is my way. What is your way? Truth, she said, slow, in public, with a paper trail, with other women. You've been a Whitmore about 5 minutes longer than you let on. No, she said. That's the version of Whitmore I'm trying to be. Manos. At 10:15, her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it. Her face didn't change, but the line of her shoulders did. She answered. Yeah. She listened for 30 seconds. Ethan watched her across the table. She was looking at the tabletop while she listened, not at him, and her free hand had opened on the wood and pressed flat, which was the same thing his own hand did when he was getting hit with information he did not yet know what to do with.
Okay, she said.
Is she willing to meet? Today? In person? Okay. Where? Okay. Put Harper on it. Tell her to do what she does. Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. She hung up. She looked at Ethan. The woman in Philadelphia, she said. The waitress. She called Daniel this morning. She's willing to break the NDA. Today? Today. Why? Because the audio got posted last night, and her daughter saw it, and her daughter asked her if the voice on the recording sounded like her, and she did not want to lie to her daughter. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second and opened them again. Okay. Harper is going to meet her at a Cracker Barrel off the turnpike at 1. Daniel will be on speaker. I will be on speaker. You will not. Good. I shouldn't be. I know, but I want to say it out loud. Okay. There are probably going to be more, she said. Harper has been chasing the other two from the settlements. One of them called her back this morning. The other one is not. There will probably be women whose cases never settled too. Women who are not on paper anywhere. Harper thinks there will be somewhere between 4 and 9 eventually. She has been doing this a long time. When she gives a range like that, she's usually low on the high end. 4 to 9 women. Yeah, this man has hurt 4 to 9 women that we know about. And he's been walking around with a watch. Yeah. Ethan sat with that for a minute. Laura. Yeah. I'm glad you pulled me into this. You are. Yeah. I was bracing for the other answer. I know you were. I had a speech ready. I bet it was a good one. It was okay. It was better on the drive over. It got worse when I sat down. That's how speeches go. Yeah. She stood up at 10:40. He stood up with her. I have to go meet Daniel, she said. And then I have to go look my father in the eye and tell him some things I didn't tell him yesterday. You go home. Pick up Mia at 3. Do nothing. Answer nothing. Wait for Daniel's call tonight. Okay. She pulled on her coat. She buttoned it slowly, the way a person buttons a coat when they are trying to find the sentence they came to say and have not said yet. Ethan. Yeah. Thank you. You don't have to. I do. Not for Tuesday. For this morning. Oh. You could have been angry. You chose not to be. That was a gift. I want to say thank you for it. He looked at her for a long second. You're welcome, he said. By 3:10 that afternoon, Harper Lane was in a booth at a Cracker Barrel off exit 266 with a woman named Jenna Marcos, who was 31 years old and had a tattoo of her daughter's name on the inside of her left wrist. And by 4, Jenna Marcos had told Harper, on a recording Jenna had agreed to, about a night in a cocktail bar in Philadelphia in the spring of 2022, during which a man named Brandon Hale had cornered her in a hallway outside a private room and put his hand somewhere it did not belong, and about what had happened in the 3 weeks after, and about the paper she had been made to sign, and about the amount of money, and about the name of the lawyer who had walked her to the car when the signing was done. By 5 that evening, Harper had a second call back from one of the other 2 settled women who said she wanted to think about it overnight and would call again in the morning. By 5:30, Daniel had sent a brief on Jenna Marcos to a reporter at a legal news outlet that nobody outside law schools read, and that every plaintiff's side lawyer in the country checked once a day, and the brief had been read by 7 in the evening by a different reporter at a larger outlet who made a note in a file she kept on Brandon Hale and had been keeping for 2 years. By 7:30, Ethan was making chicken and rice at his stove with Mia standing on a step stool next to him, stirring the rice in a way that was more for her than for the rice, and his phone was on the counter face down, and he was not looking at it. At 7:43 it rang. He picked it up. Daniel. The first domino fell today, Ethan, just so you know. I know. You know. Laura told me this morning. I know she did. I'm calling you anyway. Okay. 3 more things. 1. The school has agreed to a plainclothes officer at pickup and drop-off for the next 2 weeks at my request. You will not see him. You don't need to. He will not approach Mia or you. It's a precaution. 2. The man with the camera yesterday has been dealt with through non-legal but entirely legal channels, and his editor has been made aware that his publication will not be welcome on any property owned by any of my client's affiliates. which is a larger number of properties than you would guess. 3. 3? A reporter named Elena Park from a very real outlet is going to call you in the next 48 hours. You do not answer. You do not engage. You send her to me. I will give her a 30-minute conversation on deep background, and if she is the person I think she is, there will be a piece in print by Monday that will make everything before it look like a hobby. Okay. How's the kid? Stirring rice. Good. Daniel. Yeah. The woman today, Jenna. Yeah. Is she okay? There was a pause. Ethan could hear an office around Daniel on the other end of the line, the small sound of a man closing a door so that a kid whose dad had asked about a witness could have an answer from a lawyer with a closed door behind him. She's not okay, Daniel said. She has not been okay since 2022. But she did a hard thing today, and she did it clean, and she did it with her daughter in the back of her mind. And I think tonight she is going to sleep a little better than she has slept in 3 years. That's the best I can tell you. Okay? We're going to be all right, Ethan. I'm starting to believe you. Good. Eat your rice. He hung up. On the stove, Mia said, Daddy, I think the rice is done. He looked in the pot. The rice was not done. It had about 4 minutes left. You're right, Bug, he said. Turn it off. Let's eat. And she turned off the burner with the careful two-handed precision she used for things she had been told were breakable, and he lifted her down off the step stool, and they sat at the kitchen table, and they ate. Elena Park's piece ran on a Monday morning and ended Brandon Hale's public life by Wednesday afternoon. It was a long piece. It named 7 women, 6 of whom had agreed to be named, and it quoted from a 53-second audio recording, and it laid out the money trail of 3 settlements and the lawyer who had drafted all 3, and it mentioned in paragraph 14 that the intervening customer in the viral video from a Pennsylvania diner had been a former Army non-commissioned officer named Ethan Cole, whose 2 jobs had been terminated within 48 hours of the incident on the basis of a misleading edit, and that the full unedited footage told a different story entirely. By Thursday, an arrest warrant had been issued in Philadelphia on 2 counts that were not bailable in the way Brandon's lawyers had assumed they would be. By Friday, his entourage had thinned to 1. By the following Monday, the federal side had opened its own file, and 3 portfolio companies had quietly removed his name from their boards, and the tabloid content farm in Newark had gone out of business. Not because of this, not exactly, but close enough to this that the editor who had sent a man to the bushes at Valley Run Elementary spent a long afternoon looking for his car keys in the parking lot of a building he no longer worked in. Ethan did not watch any of it live. He got the beats from Daniel, who called most evenings around 7, and from Harper, who texted short sentences at odd hours, things like good news, call when you can and she's going to be all right. He spent most of his days that first week working in Mrs. Alvarez's kitchen at her table because his own kitchen felt like a place he had been drowning in and he was not quite ready to trust it again, and Mrs. Alvarez made him cafecito in small cups and did not ask him anything, which was a grace he would not have known how to thank her for if he had tried. 3 weeks after the piece ran, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, Laura came to the apartment for the first time. She brought a grocery bag with a rotisserie chicken in it and a bag of salad and 2 apples because, she said, she had grown up in a house where if you showed up, you brought food, and she had not been raised to show up empty-handed even if the kitchen she was walking into already had food in it. Mia had stared at her for a full 30 seconds from behind Ethan's leg before deciding, on some interior 7-year-old calculus, that this was a woman whose hands she was going to hold. She led Laura down the hall to the room with the horse stickers and showed her the stuffed rabbit named Mr. Toast and explained that he had lost his ear in the washing machine and had never been quite right since. And Laura, who had been a daughter without a mother for 11 years, sat on the edge of the bed and listened the way she had once wanted to be listened to. And at some point, Ethan, passing in the hallway with the chicken on a plate, stopped and watched them through the cracked door and had to lean against the wall for a second. The job, when Richard Whitmore offered it, came in a plain manila folder across a desk on a high floor that Ethan had no business being on. It was not a gift. It was a role, a real one, with a budget and a staff and a set of problems he was going to be expected to solve. And Richard Whitmore talked for 40 minutes about the failures of existing workplace safety intervention programs before he even mentioned salary. And Ethan, who had come in braced for charity, had to put his coffee down twice to keep his hands from giving him away. He asked for a day to think about it. He took the day. He accepted on a Wednesday morning with Mia at the breakfast table eating cereal and repeating the word director in different voices because she had decided it sounded like a kind of bird. Sarah's watch he bought back from Vinny on the same trip that he bought Mia a new winter coat, the heavy kind, with the faux fur on the hood that she had wanted since October. Vinny charged him $400 and did not pretend there was a ceremony to it, and Ethan put the watch in a drawer in his bedroom where he would see it every morning when he reached for socks. And some mornings he picked it up and turned it over in his hand and read for my Ethan, all my time, S. And some mornings he left it in the drawer. Both were all right. He had decided they were both all right. He did not marry Laura Whitmore that spring or the spring after. He was not the kind of man who mistook the end of a bad season for the beginning of a marriage. They took it at the pace a man with a daughter and a woman with a name take a thing, which was slow and honest and argued out loud when it needed arguing, and by the following fall there was a ring on her hand that Mia had helped him pick, and by the spring after that there was a small wedding in a backyard that Richard Whitmore had asked and been told no to pay for, and that Ethan had paid for himself with money he had earned at a job he had earned. Mia wore a dress that was slightly too big because she had asked for the one she could grow into. Mrs. Alvarez cried in a folding chair. Harper Lane stood at the back with her hands in her coat pockets, smiling the small smile of a woman who had seen enough of the other kind of ending to be grateful for this one. On a Saturday in June, about 2 years after the night on Route 19, Ethan Cole stood in a park near his apartment and watched his daughter ride her bicycle without training wheels for the first time. She fell twice. She got back up both times. On the third try, she caught her balance, and she pedaled once, and she pedaled again, and she went the length of the path under the maples on her own, and she did not look back at him until she was at the far end, at which point she turned her head and yelled, "Daddy, I'm doing it!" And Ethan, who had not cried in 6 years before that winter and had cried twice since, put his hand flat over his mouth and nodded at her across the grass and did not trust himself to yell anything back. Lars stood next to him. She did not take his hand. She bumped her shoulder into his arm, once, the way people do who have been standing next to each other for long enough that they know the difference between a touch that is asked for and a touch that is offered. "She's going to be all right, Ethan," she said. "Yeah. You too." "I'm getting there." He watched Mia turn the bike around at the far end of the path and start back toward him, wobbling, grinning, small. And the thing he thought, standing there, was not poetry and not a prayer, because he had never been a man of either. It was only this, that the world will take from you what it decides to take, and most of the taking is not fair, and most of it will not be explained, and none of it asks permission. But some nights a stranger says, "Please, let go 3 times in a diner," and you choose, and the choosing is yours, and the bill for the choosing will come due, and you will pay it, and on the other side of paying it. If you are very lucky, there will be a girl on a bicycle under a line of maples and a woman next to you who knows not to take your hand, and a quiet afternoon and a life. Not a perfect one, not an easy one, but one you can look at and say yours, and mean it. He stood there a while longer and watched his daughter ride. Then he walked out across the grass to meet her.